Welcome to Veterans in Transition as we celebrate Mother's Day with the story of a mother's love. Hello and happy Mother's Day. I am Major Avis McCaslin, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Colonel June Copeland as we discuss motherhood while serving on active duty. The views expressed are those of the participants and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, Army, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. Happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers watching. We appreciate you for viewing and sharing in this special moment with us. And Colonel Copeland, happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you very much, Avis. Happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you. So Colonel Copeland, why did you join the Army?
That's a pretty interesting story. Most people that know me now would never believe that I started out the way that I did. So I joined the Army because of my twin brother. My twin brother loved the military. He did 4 years in ROTC. He lived and breathed everything military. He was exceptional in ROTC. He was exceptional, and he was going to be an exceptional soldier. But we were twins, and we had never been separated in all of our lives. And so he came to me one day and he said, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom. I'll never forget it. And he said, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And so I said, sure. What do you want to talk about? He said, we've never been separated. We've never been separated, period. And I'm having a hard time thinking that, we're going to go our separate ways after graduation. What do you think about joining the Army? And I said, joining the Army? I said, Jerry, I'm not good at all that stuff. And he said, look, high school went by like that. We're going to do 3-4 years in the Army. That's going to go by like that. And it'll give you money for college. So what do you say? And I looked at him. And again, for the first time, I thought, what would life be like after graduation without him nearby? And I went to talk. We both went. We talked to my mother. And she said, you know something, I think that's a great idea. It's a good life. I know where you'll be. I know your leaders will be looking out for you. I think I'm gonna sign off on that paperwork, because we were only 17 at the time. And so I joined the Army, believing that the entire United States Army was on Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
What job did you ultimately go into? What was your MOS?
So I take great pride in the fact that I was a 91 Bravo. And most people say, okay, what's that? I was a medic. I was a combat medic. And I say that with a certain amount of exuberance, because my friends always tease me. The other day, I was talking to an amazing person in my life. And I said, hey, I was a medic. And he said, Jim, the entire human genome has changed since you used to practice medicine. But I was a combat medic, very proud of my service. Yes. And I was stationed in Germany.
How many children do you have? What's their names and what's their ages?
So I've been blessed with 3 daughters. My oldest, her name is June, just like me. She's my namesake. She's 23 years old. And my younger 2 are twins. They are 20 and they'll be 21 in July.
Oh, nice. In your own definition, what does it mean to be a mother?
In my mind, a mother is the first line of defense. And what I mean by that is that a mother is the protector. She's the person that loves and has that special bond with her children. Being a mother is, you have to be a master at almost everything. You have to be the counselor, you have to be the cook, you have to be the janitor, you have to be all of those things. You have to be the advisor, you have to be the inspiration, you have to be the role model. You have to be all these things in order to raise your children and run a household. And so I've had the pleasure, the honor of doing some amazing things in my life, but the number one mission that I've ever been given was being a mother, parenthood.
You have the distinction of having 3 daughters, All attended West Point. One recently graduated. Expound on what that means to you as a mother and a graduate of West Point yourself.
So Avis, it's humbling, it's emotional. I have a hard time still putting it into words. When my oldest decided that she was going to go to West Point, it wasn't until I saw her in that uniform that I realized that not only was she my daughter, she was my sister in arms. And then when my youngest two decided to enter the academy and actually started serving as well, and I would go up to visit and we were walking around, the emotion, the pride that I felt as a mother and as a soldier, I can't even describe it. And to have them there at the academy at the same time, I remember a funny story. I would visit often. It was a 5-hour trip for me. And so I would drive up at least once a month. And when I was leaving, when I left at one point in time, I began to cry. And my daughter, Jalen, looked at me and she kind of patted me on the shoulder. And she said, "Mommy, you're the only one that's not here." And I thought of that and I said, you know something? She's right. And as they walked away, my heart just swelled because they had each other. They had each other at the academy. And having gone through the academy alone, that was an exceptional gift for me. A lot of people find it fascinating that I attended West Point, gave birth to 3 daughters, and they attended West Point. They give a lot of regard and admiration to that. And it's a feat that hasn't happened very often. However, the thing that makes me most proud about my daughters is that June, Jalen, and Jasmine are incredible human beings. They have amazing hearts. They're loving, they're funny. Our bond is so close. West Point is fantastic, but they're incredible people.
How has the Army shaped that relationship with your children?
The Army has shaped my relationship with my children in 2 fundamental ways. And so the first way is pretty straightforward and easy to understand. Being in the military family, you're forced to move from place to place to place. We found ourselves in different locations. And as you know, every state has its own unique culture. And we're the new people in the neighborhood. We don't have roots there. And so as a result, my family and I found ourselves not very, we were away from relatives. I believe the closest I ever had the pleasure of living near my family was about 2 hours away. And so that made us very, very close, extremely close. A lot of people, when they hang around us, they often say that our love and admiration for each other is almost palatable. And I simply love that. I enjoy that and wouldn't trade it for the world. Now, the second way that the Army has shaped my relationship with my children is very subtle, very subtle. And I learned it over time. So when the girls were toddlers, I did what young parents do. I was permissive, overly permissive. I was indulgent. I tried to give them everything that I would have wanted. I did that. And I thought that was being a good parent. However, when I became a company commander, the girls were probably 6 and 8 years old at the time. And so I realized that at the height of my command, I led almost 600 soldiers. And there were a lot of personnel issues with a unit of that size, of course. For the most part, my soldiers were between 17 and 24 years old, young, impressionable, and learning their way through the world. When they got into trouble, I had to do what was right by the UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and balance that justice with the good order and discipline and morale of the unit. And so for the sake of my unit's morale, I couldn't afford to cut any corners. I was the law. And after a while, I began to see a pattern. Soldiers that arrived to my unit with no home training, you've heard that term before, right?
Right, right, absolutely.
They were always the first to get in trouble.
Yes.
And as a result, they were disciplined. it dawned on me that if I didn't change my parental style, that my children would struggle in the real world. And I realized that it was not only necessary for me to love and care for my daughters, I had to ensure that they would be good adults. I had to make sure that they learned discipline. They had to learn integrity. They had to learn honor, work ethic. They had to learn all these things. And when they learned that, they would be, they would position themselves well in society and the law wouldn't have to come get them.
Right, right, absolutely. That goes into the Army's motto is for you to be Army strong. How are you Army strong and Mommy strong all at the same time? How do you pull that off?
Now that's actually a very fun question. So when I joined the Army back in 1991, the Army's motto at that time was "Be all you can be." The little commercial with the sergeant and the coffee, be all you can be. And I at that time didn't know my full potential. I didn't even know how I fit in society, let alone what that motto "Be all you can be" really meant. And so I joined the Army with the values that my parents had instilled in me. And I mean, I had honesty, just like I taught my kids. I had honesty, discipline, hard work ethic, sacrifice. That was another thing my parents taught me. I had those things, but I didn't know about schedules and PT and drill and ceremony and the rank structure and Army marksmanship. I didn't know about all those things. And so after many years, I found myself being a single mother with three kids, all under 3 years old. The Army challenged me in ways that I never thought imaginable. I was being all that I could be for sure. I
Definitely.
remember one of my moves, my kids were 2 and 4. And I was tired from the drive. I had driven all the way from Fort Hood and I was tired, exhausted. The kids were fussy. And I made the ultimate mistake of telling the movers that were hired to unpack my boxes and move my family into our home. I told them, hey guys, I'll take care of this myself. I'll unpack my boxes. You just go on and everything will be fine. I don't know what I was thinking. For weeks, it took me weeks to unpack those boxes in the middle of the night because in the daytime, I had work to go to and I had children to manage. So after hours, there I was breaking open boxes and unpacking stuff and throwing things out it was horrible. Um, that was a pretty difficult time in my life. I just learned some valuable lessons, and that was an opportunity for me to be all that I could be. And so my commanders never gave me any slack. And it's not because they were heartless. They were actually, I guess, leading the way the Army wants you to lead. They were making me be all I could be. They weren't cutting me any slack. They required certain things and I had to deliver. And so I remember days where I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning just to make sure the kids were ready to go by the time daycare opened so that I could be at PT formation at 0600 in the morning. Organization was key. Um, I had the task of getting three small children up every single morning, getting them dressed, and then getting them to daycare. Each child had a little cubby at the time, and I still have my daughter's cubby. When she moved out, I don't know why she didn't take it with her. I digress. I digress. But they each had things I had to do in order to make sure they were organized. And, they had three girls sharing a bathroom. They each had a little hourglass. So when they went in, they turned the hourglass upside down, and that's the amount of time they had in the bathroom. So it was those type things that kept us together. I can say over 20 years of being in the military and with my children, I've never had a problem getting to work on time or um, not being where I was supposed to be because I couldn't get the kids in their right shoes or anything like that. My family never had those kind of problems. So those were good. But here's another thing that came out. Um, at night, my home was absolutely quiet after 8 o'clock. I would tell the kids at 8:01, you're stealing mommy's time. You're stealing mommy's time. My kids were in bed, and I used the couple of hours I had before I went to sleep to actually prep for the next day, take care of myself. And again, that's how we made it.
Yeah.
That's how we made it. Those were tough years. Those were really tough years. I had to figure out, and here's the thing, I wanted to do well in both my military life and my parenting life, you know?
Mhm.
And I wanted to give them each their proper due. And so, that being the case, I had to figure out how to merge these two lives to the best way possible. And I did that in a couple different ways. I always talked to my kids and communicated with them about life in the military and what I was doing and why I was doing it. I would get them events to get them tickets to events like the military ball or the AG ball. And people would say that's just a waste of money. Your kids are only 7, they're only 10. But it makes a great impression on a child when they're able to dress up, especially a young girl, to dress up in a ball gown and, put on her best and go and sit in and see what life is like on the other side of the army. I remember having an assignment where I worked in cubicle land, and sometimes we had to work on the weekends, or sometimes I had to work on the weekends. And so when I did that, I pretty much packed a basket with lunch, brought the kids in. They would play hide and seek in cubicle land. I would do my work. Sometimes they would actually do their work at a conference room table. And then we'd probably take a break to go do recess. I had to integrate the life in order to make sure that I was giving proper time and proper quality time to both things that had my heart. So to both, I don't want to call them things, to both of them because they had my heart. 20 plus years in the Army and raising children at the same time as a single mom. The Army's current motto is Army Strong. And so I can honestly tell you that right now, today, I truly embody the Army's motto. I am definitely Army strong.
So when I hear that, I hear you handling everything you went through with such grace, you know. But a big question I have for you, did you ever just get overwhelmed with it all?
Okay, I'll answer that question like this. If someone stood at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro and looked up to the very top, I'm sure they would describe that sight as overwhelming. But here's the reality: Mount Kilimanjaro has been conquered. So, with that being said, I can look at my life and admit it was overwhelming and required a lot of strength. But I don't know where other people draw their strength from, Avis, but for me, my faith has played an integral role in every aspect of my life, every single aspect. My relationship with the Trinity has been literally what's guided me through the years in every aspect of my life. I um I also can say that, God gave me parents that literally were tough on me and taught me how to tackle an obstacle. So my dad used to always say when I was a kid, the toughest thing you'll ever go through is me. And me and my twin brother would look at him and say, why? Why are you trying to be so difficult about everything? But it wasn't until I was older that I realized the wisdom of what he was trying to do. He wanted us to get in the mindset he knew life was going to be tough. And he wanted us to realize that it's not going to be easy. You've got to take the bull by the horns and tackle obstacles as they come. And so you think that, my dad was a tough one, but my mom was pretty tough too. I remember when 9/11, it was the day after 9/11, and I was afraid because, whoa, you know what happened. Everyone remembers where they were on that day. And I remember calling my mom and complaining, and then talking about I was fearful because, what if we deploy? And my mother, I will never forget these words. My mother said, "Do you get a paycheck on the 1st and 15th?"
Mm.
And I said, well, yes. She said, well, that's what you get the paycheck for. It is your job to protect the nation. It is your turn, and that's what you're supposed to do. She said, if you're going to call here again, make sure you have the right attitude.
Okay.
And that was the last time I called my mom complaining about anything in the Army.
So you had that tough love structure all the way around.
From the very beginning. I
Yeah.
was loved unconditionally and disciplined unconditionally.
Right. So if I ask the girls, what's their greatest challenge while you served, what would they say? Have you asked them this question?
I have. I have. I mean, we've talked about it over the years. I can say my daughters love our life, but if they had to change a few things, they would probably change the hours. We had to do some crucial hours. Like I said, a 5-year-old kid having to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It broke my heart, but it was what was required at the time. And so the hours, they would also probably tell me to dial back some of that soldier mentality that I have. If I had to, not if I had to, I've asked them before, but those would be the two things that I would say that really impacted them the most.
Did you ever deploy?
Yes, yes. I deployed twice. Both times were to Kuwait, but for two very different missions. The first time I deployed, I was the senior human resources officer in theater. And in that capacity, I'm sorry, I conducted some very unforgettable missions in Iraq and in the Horn of Africa. On my second deployment, I was the Division G1 for the 29th Infantry Division. And that was a very unique assignment in and of itself. We were the first division to actually do that mission. And we were operationally responsible for 18,000 soldiers in 11 different countries.
How old were the girls when you deployed? Or the first
First
deployment?
time,
Mhm.
the first time I deployed, the twins were 8 and June was 10 years old.
Okay. And what were some of the things you did to prepare yourself for that separation? Because that's always a challenge.
Yes, very much so. Because you want to make sure you make life as easy for them as possible. So I found myself buying crates and crates of things like tissue paper and paper products, plates. I didn't want them to be washing dishes or cups or anything like that. So I ended up buying, shelves and shelves of detergent and things of that nature just to make sure that they were prepared for the deployment. And then I had never purchased, 9 to 10 months worth of stuff at one time. So I overdid it. I really did overdo it. And also, I didn't want my girls to not have the benefit of my cooking because they love my cooking. And so I cooked up a lot of meals in the weeks leading up to my departure, and I would put them in the deep freezer so that they could just be warmed up and they can still think of me.
Okay. And what did you fear the most while deployed away from the children? What was your greatest fear or fears?
Initially, I feared I wouldn't make it back.
It's always the greatest fear, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think it hit me the most. I've literally always been about duty, honor, country. I loved serving in the military, and I would always say that if I won the lottery, I show up to work the next day because being in the military has been one of the greatest joys of my life and definitely one of my greatest honors. But the only time I can tell you in since 1991 that I questioned what I was doing and why I was doing it. And it only took place for like a split second, about 10 seconds, was when it was on my first deployment. And my mother and my best friend and my daughters brought me to the airport. And when they dropped me off, they walked as far into the airport as they possibly could. And when I looked back at them and they were standing there waving, I was strong enough to get behind the wall to go down the aisle. But when I got back there, I was a split second from passing out. I literally, everything in me wanted to go back, run back, and just hug them one more time. But I am a soldier and I am duty bound. I really am. And it was my turn. And so I got on the plane and my feet felt like they were encased in concrete. And I got on the plane. And ordinarily, plane rides are great for an extrovert like me. But I sat down and the gentleman next to me just kept chatting. And after about the fifth sentence, I looked at him and I must have looked pained because everything I felt is always expressed in my face. And I said, "Sir," I said, "I know you mean well and I absolutely don't mean any harm." I said, "But I just left the most important people in my life back there. And I don't know if I'm going to see them again. So I need time to myself." And he understood and let me be. So I took the next several hours on the plane to compose myself and get ready for my mission.
And you made it through,
And I
like you
made it through.
always
So that was my number one fear. I had other fears.
do.
I feared that my children would lose all the lessons that I'd spent so much time trying to teach them. But leaving the children with my parents, they pretty much kept the rules that I kept. So it was no problem when I got back. Another fear of mine was them forgetting me or our bond weakening. And I brought a couple of items with me that I'm sorry.
I'll tell you this while you're thinking about that. My daughter was 2 years old at the time when I deployed
Oh,
for the first time. And my
oh,
kids, they were not used to me being a military mom. I was brand new at this, and this was less than a year, and I had orders to deploy.
oh,
So I spoke to my 2 year old on the phone, and she said, "Mommy, did you get dyed?" And my heart broke because she
oh.
could see me. Well, it wasn't on the phone. We were FaceTiming and she
Mhm.
could see my face. But the connection she made with me not being there when she wakes up every morning was that I was dead. And that was difficult. That was a challenge. So I understand what you mean when you say what you just expressed.
Well, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I respect and honor your service, but trust me, my heart is with yours in that moment. I do understand what you had to go through.
Mhm.
One of the things that I did in order to make sure that my children didn't forget me or that our bond was still strong when I returned, I actually reached everything that I did, I would actually share with them. Meaning if I went to uh, a sharp or some type of a briefing, an in-country briefing, they give out little pamphlets like that. And so I would put a little note, handwritten note on it and say, "Hey, this is what mommy did today." And I would put that in the mail and send it. I sent a lot of boxes home, sometimes weekly, sometimes every other week. But Easter, the most memorable thing I know that I sent, Easter is a pretty big deal in our household. And so I wanted to make sure that all my daughters had handcrafted Easter baskets, made by their mom and on time. And
Mhm.
so imagine the challenge of putting together Easter baskets in a predominantly Islamic culture,
Yeah.
but I made it happen.
Yes. So that was a way you stayed connected to the kids. Were there any other ways you stayed connected to the kids while deployed?
Yes, Facebook Messenger, emails when they got older were lifesavers.
Mhm.
To be able to pick up the phone and give them a call, I would I would have my own hours, my own work day, but they had a different work day. We were 9 to 10 hours ahead, depending on what country I was in at the time. And I found that my day would have to be extended to 18 and 19-hour days just so that I could be available for them when they needed me. And so I didn't realize how important video calling was to
Yeah.
be able to see them. The first time I deployed, I thought, I don't need any pictures. I don't need anything. I just got to stay focused on the mission.
Army
That's
strong.
Army strong. That's how people get killed.
Complacency kills.
Yes, yes. And so I needed to be focused. But the second time I deployed, I can tell you the most invaluable thing was to be able to see their faces.
Yes, absolutely. I can well imagine. Now, at some point, there was a reintegration. You had to bring it back together. How was that reintegration period for you? Did they, they had been doing life for so many months, a year without you? Did you come back and they're like, Mom, I got this. We don't need you to do this. How was the reintegration for you?
Okay, I can honestly say that based on my personal experience and based on the experience of soldiers that I've led and peers that I've gone with and come back, or peers that have gone and come back and we talk about their story, I can honestly say that when you go and come back, you're not the same. Regardless of whether you are in a non-combat zone or if you are in a zone that sees lots of action, lots of fighting, the reason you aren't the same is because you're in a totally different culture, in a totally different environment. You have to operate differently, think differently. You have to be more aware because, again, a mistake, we just laughed about that, but a mistake can kill. And so, and so you have to be very vigilant. And when you come back home, it translates into being, I would say, hyper vigilant. And so I noticed a couple of things in myself. I found myself kind of impatient. I found myself kind of irritable. I was quick to irritation. I found myself, and here's the most compelling thing, I found myself going through a myriad of emotions when I saw other people living a normal life and they didn't seem to have the weight of what I had experienced on their shoulders. I found myself sometimes envious. I found myself sometimes resentful, but a lot of times I found myself full of pride because I was part of the machine that was the reason that they could be as free as they were.
Yes.
So there's that. And but that was me and my mindset. So how was it integrating back into my household? It was strange. I I couldn't understand why I didn't know where the ketchup was at. I didn't understand why I kept going to one place and the garbage can wasn't there. I remember, but me and the girls, we were solid when I got back. And it was all because they felt my presence the entire time. But there was one strange thing. They were acting a little different and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So one day I was watching television with them and I realized they were imitating Zach and Cody. So we had to have a conversation after that.
Oh, Disney.
Yes, they were becoming Disney kids and I didn't raise Disney kids. So
Yes.
that was my reintegration process.
Okay. I can completely relate to that. Um, so thank you for the transparency because a lot of that is hard to admit when you have to self-reflect and say, what kind of person was I when I came back? What challenges did I struggle with internally? So thank you for that transparency. Now, the big takeaway in all of this is motherhood, right? Um,
Yeah.
what advice would you give military moms today?
So one of my favorite motivational speakers is Brene Brown. And she made this quote by Teddy Roosevelt very popular today. It's called The Man in the Arena. And I think she's tailored it to the woman in the arena or the person in the arena. And I just want to read a short excerpt from it. So let me
Oh,
look at
absolutely.
that. It says, the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement. So that's just the middle. You're probably trying to figure out where was I going with that, but there's more to it, of course.
Mhm.
But I would tell mothers everywhere, but especially military mothers, to know that you are powerful and very, very capable. Yes, the road is hard, but it's also very rewarding. As a mother, as we mentioned earlier in the interview, as a mother, you have to be organized. You have to be a protector. You have to be a role model. You have to be a guide. You have to be all these things. And also, you're a professional soldier. And sometimes you're a spouse. I didn't have the honor of being a spouse, but sometimes you're a spouse. You have so many different worthy causes competing for your time. So think of it like juggling eggs. If you drop or mishandle even one of them, you have quite a mess on your hands, right?
Right.
So I would tell mothers to do your very best to maintain balance.
Yeah.
Prioritize what is important versus what's urgent and take one thing at a time. Bit by bit, as my mother would always say.
Yeah.
Next, I would advise them to give it their best and learn to forgive yourself and care for yourself like you care for others. Mothers have a tendency to put themselves on the back burner and wear their sacrifice as a badge of honor. But what I learned is that your spouse and your children, they hurt when you're not well taken care of. So include yourself in that list of important people. Also, make sure that your family knows that you're human and that you require time for yourself too. Because if they get in the habit of just taking advantage and just saying, well, mommy will take care of it, mommy will do this, then they'll lose sight of the fact that you need time too. And some mothers get resentful after a while. And so when I was a kid, my mom used to always say, and I laughed and laughed because she would always say, yep, baby, raising kids sure is hard, but it's worth it. And after a few years, I would say, Mama, why do you pause right there? She said, girl, because there's a lot in that gap.
Yes. I can feel it.
Yes. And so I remember when the kids were small and I was having a rough day, uh, I just started laughing. And she looked at me and she said, Silly, what are you laughing at? And I said, Mama, raising kids is tough, but it's worth it. And she cried. She laughed until she cried because she said, how do you remember that? And I said, Mama, how could I not remember that? But jokes aside, I will say it 1,000 times. Raising kids is a challenge. It's a mission like no other. It's hard, but it's definitely worth it. It is worth it for you to mold and shape these young lives. They are our future. They really are. And they need you to make them great. And so I'll tell the last bit of advice that I would give young mothers, not young mothers, military mothers, mothers of every walk of life. Don't be afraid to step into the arena.
I have another question for you.
Sure.
Do you have any leadership nuggets that you would care to share?
I can't tell you the number of times that people meet me and based on what they read about me and when they actually see me, you can see it in their eyes, the confusion. It's like, you're not what I thought you would be. And so I've grown used to it. I don't get offended. I just know that it's my job to show them who I am, the content of my character, if you will. And so because of that, I quickly realized that there is a difference. There is a significant difference in how I can lead because people have different perceptions of me. And so I found that as a woman in our society, as a Black woman in our society, that there's a certain way that I'm that I have to lead in order to be successful. And so I've learned that my biggest superpower, my greatest superpower, is my empathy and my care and concern for my soldiers. That's the number one. Number two, right behind it, is my competence. So I'll say this: know your craft. A lot of people come to work half doing it. I'll say that, but you know the term that I really want to say. But they come to work and they half do it. They don't know what's going on. Things hit them as if by surprise. When you, as the leader, are responsible for the mission, you're responsible for everything that happens and doesn't happen. And so, know your craft, know what you are getting paid to do. That's what Mama always said.
Mhm.
And how does that tie into the first one? When you know your craft and you're able to put together a vision for your unit, I've found that when you care for your soldiers, when you take care of them, not just give them everything they want, when you lead them, when you guide them, when you provide for them, and when you train them and discipline them, even discipline them, when you do all those things, they will rise to the occasion every single time. And at first, I thought it was a coincidence. But by the third or fourth time it happened, I'm confident. I'm confident, and those are the two main things, main characteristics, main traits main leadership tools that I use in order to be successful in every assignment that I've been. And I've been in assignments all over the world.
Since you've been around the world, what has been your best assignment?
Mm. So I've had some incredible assignments. I was the military assistant to the Assistant Secretary of the Army. That was a phenomenal tour because I worked in the Pentagon. And because my grandmother was literally born on the plantation where our ancestors were enslaved, to be working in the Pentagon was amazing for me. But that wasn't my best assignment. My best assignment, and even the company commander story that I told, that assignment, that was incredible. We still, me and my Charlie Company soldiers, still have a bond like this. I love them, they love me. That will never change. We're a family. But even that wasn't my best assignment. The best assignment I had was Fort Benning, home of the infantry. So I remember one of my leaders looking at me and saying, well, I will tell you the reason it was my favorite assignment is because of what I learned. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my misconceptions. I learned a lot about what it takes to protect a nation. And I can I can go back, I can qualify that by telling a couple of stories. I love to tell stories. And so I remember one day my boss brought me into the office and he said, "Hey, June, the way you look at this next thing I'm going to say to you is going to determine how well you do here at Fort Benning, home of the infantry." And in my mind, I said, "Why would he say it like that?" And he goes, "Do you know the definition of professionalism?" Because I was young, impulsive, and easily offended, I said, "Well, sir, of course I know what the word professionalism means." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Remember what I said, depending on how you take this next thing that I say to you is going to determine how well you do in this assignment." And I said, "Okay." He said, "So I need you to listen to me." He said, "Do you have a dictionary?" I said, "Well, yes, sir, it's on my desk." He said, "Yes, every good officer has a dictionary." So he said, "I need you to go back to your office and get that dictionary and look up the word professionalism." And so by that time I gotten past my hubris, I gotten past my offense, and I was curious because again, I like to learn. And he said, "Here are the facts, June." He said, "You are female, you're Black, and you're an AG officer on a post that's dominated by infantry officers." He said, "Depending on what part of the country you're in, any of those things can be looked at as a negative." He said, "But I'll tell you this, professionalism trumps all of that. Professionalism overcomes all of that." He said, "So what I need you to do is go back to your office, pick up that dictionary, and become the definition of professionalism."
Mm.
He said, "If you become it, you will not have any problems while you're here in this assignment." And so I did that. I literally did that. And I truly enjoyed my time working in Fort Benning, home of the infantry. I truly enjoyed my time there. And when I left, a little over 3 years later, they gave me the honor of making me the first captain and the first female honorary member of the regiment. And so, again, the the advice that he gave me was spot on. I was able in that unit to meet some of our nation's greatest warriors, um, retired Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore and his Sergeant Major, Basil Plumley from, remember, did you ever see the movie We Were Soldiers Once and Young?
I didn't.
It was a Mel Gibson movie. And the Sergeant Major that stood there in the face of war, in the face of an engagement, as bullets flew over his head. He stood there strong and encouraged his troops to move forward and close with the enemy. I watched him cry in formation, literally drop tears, and held on to his certificate, because at that ceremony they named him an honorary member of the regiment. So when I got named an honorary member of the regiment, I realized that I was in the company of people like this, warriors like this that protected our freedom. So that was my most amazing assignment. I have loved every job that I've ever served in. I mean, literally loved it, but that was my most amazing assignment.
Okay. And how do you give back to your community?
So for me, giving back to the community has changed some since COVID started, but throughout my children's lives, and of course, the majority of my adult life, we've done many things in order to give back to the community. We've done the food drives. We donate time at domestic abuse shelters. We've also donated time at elderly homes and hospitals. But the primary way that I give back, the one way that has my absolute passion, is donating time to our nation's youth. There's a song back in the 80s. It was called, I don't know the title of it, but it was called I Believe That Children Are Our Future. You remember that song? Yes. So
I think that's the title.
oh. Well, it's not just a song to me. It's not just a song title to me. It's actually the truth. It's a fact. And most people don't realize how important our society, how important children are to the future of our society. They just don't realize it. And if they understood the full depth of what they're doing when they impart knowledge or when they raise children, whether correctly or incorrectly, they would take their responsibilities a lot more seriously, because you are shaping the future of that child and everyone that child will come in touch with in the future. And so for me, again, COVID's changed a lot, but I donated a lot of time to high schools, middle schools. I also do a lot of work with college recruiting, not just for West Point, although I do a pretty good job recruiting for West Point. Three of my own kids go there.
Yes.
But colleges overall. And so I donate a lot of time. And it's not donating, it's a passion of mine. And I find that when you open up the eyes of a young person and you give them focus and direction and they go out and they succeed, it's an incredible feeling, because not only are you giving to society, you are changing the trajectory of that child's life. Remember when I said my mom, she said, you'll be okay in the Army, it'll be fine. I remember I was 6 weeks into basic training, and it was a Wednesday. I will never forget it. It was a Wednesday, and I saw my orders and it said that I was going to Germany. And I said, I've never been out of America before. I'm not going anywhere. I don't know what they're thinking. So I snuck out of the barracks after TAPS, and I had a handful of change, and I ran to the phone booths. And I called my mom, and the moment I heard her voice, my heart just broke and I started to cry. And she panicked. She was like, "Baby, are you okay? Did anybody touch you?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 no." And she said, "Okay, cry it out. And then let me and then tell mama what's wrong." And so when I finished crying, I just told her, I said, "Mama, I can't do this. I'm not a real adult. I can't do this." And she said, "Baby," she said, "can you hold out till Saturday? We can talk about it in more detail then." And I said, "Sure, I can hold out till Saturday." And she said, "Well, it's after taps and you need to get back at the barracks before you get in trouble." And I said, "Okay, fine, fine, fine." Well, for the rest of the week, I was walking on a cloud because my mom solved all my problems. There wasn't a problem that mama couldn't solve. And Saturday, we were doing drill and ceremony. We were doing drill and ceremony. And and I was walking around all happy and whatnot. And in basic training, you only see basic colors like green, brown, black, dirt, clay, those type colors. And so I was marching, I was a squad leader, and I was marching my squad into the company area when I noticed pink and yellow and purple and red. And I kept staring at it, and it was fluttering all around. And I said, "What is that?" And I kept staring at it. And then I said, "Oh, it's someone's shirt." And my eyes, my periphery, it opened up, and it was my mother standing in the bleachers. And not only was it my mother, it was my grandmother, my aunt, my grandfather, my uncle, my cousin. There were about 8 people there total. And when I saw them, I just broke down and cried, but I didn't leave formation. And my drill sergeant looked at me and he said, "Private, what's the problem?" And I said, and he said, "You want me to get rid of them? Let me go get rid of them. Tell them to get out of here." And I was like, "No, drill sergeant, no." And he said, "Oh, so you know them?" I said, "Yes, drill sergeant." He said, "Do you like them?" I said, "Yes, drill sergeant." And he said, "Do you want to do," he said, "would you be willing to do push-ups for them?" So I jumped on the ground and started doing push-ups, and I looked over, and my dad had grabbed my mom because she was coming out of the stands for that drill sergeant. And so, and so when I finished, he grabbed my weapon. He said, "Private, going over and talk to your mom, talk to your family." And I raced over there and I jumped on my mom and I hugged her. And I was so excited to see her. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Baby," she sat me down. There was we sat down on this picnic bench, and she said, "Baby," she said, "I know you think you can't do this." She said, "But," she said, "this is what you were meant to do." And I said, "Mama, I can't." And she said, "You can and you will." My mother has been the biggest cheerleader for me when I didn't believe I could do any of this. And she was by my side from beginning to end in all aspects. When I was heartbroken, when I was in trouble, when I had no confidence in myself, she was my biggest cheerleader. And to be here now and to have our life story inspire other people has been truly remarkable. It's been amazing. And for every sacrifice that she made for me, for every sacrifice she made for me, every time we inspire someone with our story, I just want her to know, wherever she's at in heaven, that every sacrifice she made was worth it. She was pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. I have no idea where I was going with that story. How did I get off on that?
Anybody eyes dry?
Oh man, that's my favorite story about my mother. My favorite story. But oh yeah, so I know where I was going with that. So from the private that knew for a fact she couldn't do it to being a colonel that has done it. And now I have children that are doing it in better fashion than I ever did. It's it's pretty incredible. It's humbling. It's a miracle. It really is a miracle, and I thank God for it.
Beautiful message, very inspiring. I'm very inspired by your very presence and all of the accomplishments and all of the grit that it takes to raise kids and be in the military all at the same time. So thank you. We honor you and all mothers who rise to the occasion. So do you have anything else that you would like to add? Any additional information you want to share?
I only have one more thing. Since it's Mother's Day, or since we're honoring mothers and Mother's Day, I want to wish everyone out there a happy Mother's Day. And I also want to send a very special Mother's Day to my mother. I don't know where she is right now, but I know she's looking at me and she's very proud and she's smiling. So I want to tell her happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to your mom as well.
Thank you.
This presentation was produced by Veterans in Transition, who is uniquely qualified and committed to promoting military families and the veteran community. We ask that you like, share, and follow us on social media. For more information, email us at info@vetsintransition.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Major Avis McCaslin. Until next time.